mince my words either. Voters in North Shropshire were fed up, and they've given us a kicking. And I want voters to know that we as a Conservative Party, and I as a Conservative Party chairman, have heard that message. This was a by-election in unique circumstances that began with the resignation of the incumbent MP over sleaze allegations and continued with numerous stories that you don't need me to repeat around alleged parties and so on. The only point I would make is that mid-term, if you're expecting a surge of government, of the new government, of the Labour Party, you would have expected them to win this by-election. In fact, they sank from a strong second place. So this feels more like a mid-term by-election and not like a sea change.
Well, why did you win in Bexley 2 weeks ago then?
Well, we did very well in Bexley, and we fought that campaign.
And that was before these party stories emerged, isn't it?
The by-election was different in a number of respects. Most notably, the one in Bexley was caused by the tragic death of my friend James Brockenshire. Mm-hmm. The one in North Shropshire was not asked for by the people of North Shropshire. It was caused by the resignation of the incumbent MP over sleaze. Now, the Prime Minister has accepted that mistakes were made in relation to that, and I think it's right for him to do so.
What has the Prime Minister said to you about this morning's result?
The Prime Minister has heard that message.
No, but
loud,
I mean, I don't want
clear.
the intimate details. But what has he said? Oliver, we've got to do this, or Oliver, be sure we do this. What has he said?
Well, the Prime Minister and I are absolutely agreed that the focus of government
have you spoken with
be,
Mr. Johnson this morning?
I've been in touch with the Prime Minister.
Right. So what is
morning.
the essence of what
I'm seeing the Prime Minister immediately after I've done this very extensive news round this morning.
Okay.
What we must do as a government is demonstrate that we are focused on the people's priorities. And I think what you've heard over the past couple of months is a lot of noises off. That is why, for example, we are focusing in the middle of this terrible surging Omicron virus, we're focusing on getting the booster into people's arms in order to make sure that we can keep some element of normality going on in our lives. That's why we're engaged with the hospitality industry, who are facing tremendous challenges right now. We have to be laser-like focused on the people's priorities, and that is the message I take from this, that people don't want all these noises off. They want us focused on their priorities.
But you've created the noises off of a series of own goals, haven't you? Or the Conservative Party haven't you? With the disastrous handling of the sleaze affair with Owen Paterson, the parties that might or might not have taken place in Downing Street, and a lockdown, which is a lockdown by another name. You've brought these all on yourselves.
I completely accept, Nick, the points that you're making, particularly around the sleaze. What I would say to you, though, is if you look at the big calls that the Prime Minister and the government has faced, getting Brexit done, he got Brexit done. Faced with the biggest challenge since the Second World War, we put a huge bet on the vaccines. We've delivered the fastest vaccine rollout programme twice in a row.
As we go
and
into
we now have
2022?
unemployment lower than it was when the COVID crisis first hit 2 years ago. I think people will ultimately, at the next general election, judge us by those big calls, although I, of course, completely appreciate all of the frustrations that you're talking about there, Nick.
But let's talk a little bit about the Prime Minister, if we may. Trevor Kavanagh, who you'll need no introduction, but I remind my listeners he's the former political editor of The Sun and has been around for decades, and Trevor won't mind me saying that. He told me earlier this morning he thinks Boris Johnson will limp on. He's never seen anything like this in all his years of reporting. This is a fiasco, isn't it?
Well, I find it very difficult to believe that Trevor Kavanagh has never seen anything like this in all his years of political reporting. The Conservative Party didn't win a by-election in government from 1989 until 2014. Well, we lost the Brecon and Radnorshire by-election to the Liberal Democrats in 2019, and we won it back again in 2019. It is the case that people feel fed up and they've given us a kicking, but if the sort of result that the Liberal Democrats get in by-elections was repeated at general elections, they would have been in government for the past 50 years.
I take that point. But, Chairman, we have a Deputy Prime Minister who can't get the number of people right in hospital Omicron. We've got a Prime Minister who's not sure whether he was or he wasn't at a party and tries to back up his sleaze-ridden buddy, and a Chancellor who goes to the United States and immediately turns round because of the Follies decision. This is a Whitehall farce, but unfortunately this theatre is still open. That's the reality with the Conservative administration, isn't it?
The reality of this administration is faced with rapidly rising Omicron, which is doubling almost 2 days, we have unleashed the fastest booster rollout program or vaccine rollout program, not just in this country, anywhere in the world. We're focused on getting on with the job. You talked about the Chancellor. The Chancellor was in the United States of America promoting British businesses, has been in touch with the hospitality industry during his time out there, and has stood by businesses all the way through this crisis.
Why is he, if he's been in touch, why the need for him to come back?
The Chancellor obviously recognises, and you've seen this, and I've seen.
He should never have gone in the first place, should he?
This virus is spreading at a rate of knots, and it is having a profound impact on business. But if you want to ask me about the Chancellor's record, look at what I did when I worked with the Chancellor when I was Culture Secretary. I was faced with a situation where a third of football clubs would go under, 2/3 of cultural institutions would go under. We put the support in for them, £2 billion worth of support for the Culture Recovery Fund, and meant that no business went bust. It's those kind of big calls that come the election, I think people will be focused on.
Just a couple of other things. Is it correct that Boris Johnson attended a pizza party in the first months of lockdown?
Well, my understanding is that they had a meeting in the garden of Number 10. It was appropriate to have meetings at that time. It was a business meeting, obviously, working in Number 10. And it's better to have it outside, as you know, given the risk of spread.
So he was there with 20 other staff who drank wine and spirits and ate pizza?
I don't know the exact details of what happened, but what I do know is that there was a press conference, and afterwards he met with the health secretary. It's perfectly appropriate for him to meet with the health secretary, and it's better to do so outside given the risk of spread.
I remind you, the rules at that time, Mr. Chairman, allowed 2 people from different households to meet outside at a distance of 2 metres. The Prime Minister attended a gathering where there were 20.
Well, this was a business meeting. He was meeting with the health secretary in his capacity as health secretary, and at the time you were perfectly entitled to meet with people in the context of essential business. And I think you would agree the Prime Minister meeting with the health secretary in the middle of a COVID pandemic would amount to essential business.
How many more parties are there? Do the Conservatives have time for work? So it just seems one long party.
Well, Nick, I think that's a deliberately sort of entertaining and provocative answer. I think we have provided an explanation in relation to all of the events that have happened, and as you know, the Cabinet Secretary is currently conducting an investigation. But I do want to address this point head on. I do appreciate people's frustration if they feel that the government somehow has different rules to them. That's essential that we get to the bottom of any allegations around that. That's why the Cabinet Secretary is conducting that investigation. It's essential that we all play by the rules, and that's exactly what we've been doing.
A couple of last things. Some people are suggesting this is a lockdown by another name. You, the Prime Minister, you can't bring yourself to actually say lockdown, but the fact that you're advised to only go out if you need to work from home, only try and ration the number of parties you attend, it is a lockdown in reality, isn't it, Mr. Chairman?
Well, actually, I think it's completely the opposite. The temptation would be to lock down face with this Omicron variant. And indeed, other countries are going down that path. We instead have decided to put our chips on the vaccine programme with this record booster rollout.
Yes,
if you get your vaccine, you get 75% protection. Now, this is a key point. Because we are doing that, it is enabling us to keep businesses open. So actually, it is the opposite, that we are putting the effort into the vaccine programme precisely to keep businesses open.
Lastly, on the subject of the theatres and the lockdown, and as a former, very recent Culture Secretary, you won't have had time to read a piece by Andrew Lloyd Webber in one of the newspapers today, the Daily Mail, but he writes the following: I'm nearly 74. I'm desperate to get back to writing again. Instead, for the last year and a half, I've been campaigning for the commercial theatre industry. In the end, I've come to the conclusion no one in the government listens. Certainly not the new Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, who's made it abundantly clear she doesn't think commercial theatre needs any support. It's a difficult message for all the industries, jobs and people who are now lurching from day to day to hear from someone who is supposed to be a Tory minister representing the arts. How much contact has there been with someone such as Lord Lloyd Webber and his campaign?
Well, I think I could actually lose count of the number of times I've spoken to Lord Lloyd Webber. In fact, I had dinner with Lord Lloyd Webber the other day. I spoke to him constantly during this crisis. I know how challenging it has been for commercial theatres, and that's why we have put support in place for commercial theatres, not least the VAT cut on the ticket sales, and that's why a number of them were also able to benefit from measures such as the job retention and furlough scheme, and some of them were able to benefit from the £2 billion cultural
It seems your
recovery
successor
fund. So
does not enjoy the same relationship.
We are there for them.
Their successor has not enjoyed the same relationship. Nadine Dorries, Lord Lloyd Webber is openly critical of her.
Well, I think Nadine Dorries is doing an excellent job, and I just saw yesterday she has been working to make sure that many cultural institutions are opening up to ensure that the vaccine is delivered in them. So I'm sure.
Well, I don't think that's what Lord Lloyd Webber wants his theatres for somehow, to become vaccination centres. Do you? I think he wants to put on shows that actors and actresses can be in, that people can attend, and the industry turns over. Are you suggesting we just turn Her Majesty's and the Theatre Royal Drury Lane into mini hospitals?
That's not what I'm suggesting at all. And I'm saying that we've put the support in time and time again. In fact, I was at the theatre just the other day myself, and I engaged with Lord Lloyd Webber throughout my time as culture.
And I appreciate lastly
I'm sure that my successor is engaging as well. I don't know whether she's actually spoken to Lord Lloyd Webber himself.
Might you suggest it would be an idea, perhaps, lastly, Mr. Chairman?
I know that my successor will be engaging with lots of businesses and theatre companies up and down the country, and I'm sure she'll find time to speak to Lord Lloyd Webber as well.
Grateful for your time. Thank you, Oliver Dowden, Chairman of the Conservative Party, appearing here on LBC, where at 2 minutes after 8 news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, the Liberal Democrats have overturned a 23,000 Tory majority to win the North Shropshire by-election.
Morgan, Helen Margaret Lillian, Liberal Democrats, 17,950